Hello, my name is Joe Cartwright and welcome to my studio. New students of watercolour often struggle with creating a bright sky, especially a lovely golden sunset, instead ending up with some dull colours and a sky that leans towards the green. So in today's video I'm going to show you a few simple steps to avoid that so that you end up with a lovely, warm and bright sunset. This is today's subject. It's a lovely photograph. There's not much I'm going to change in it other than moving the sun further into the painting because it's a bit too close to the edge here. Because this painting is primarily about the sky, I'm going to bring the horizon down a little bit. Here I'm just drawing the shoreline. Just very lightly marking the trees. Important thing here is not to create a hedge effect where all the trees are the same. Just add some variety to the trees. I'm going to press a little bit harder just so you can see this a bit easier. This is all the drawing I would do for a painting like this. The pencil marks are darker than I normally use. I just wanted you to be able to see the shapes. In a minute I'm going to erase most of those marks, or at least lighten them quite a bit. I'll begin by wetting the back of my paper. And because I still keep getting questions about why I wet the back of the paper, I've left a link in the description section below of a video I made on this very subject. It's well worth watching it if you haven't already watched it. Basically, by wetting the back, the benefits are the paper is going to sit very flat on the board and I'll have a lot more time to paint my painting, especially the wet on wet sections. I'm going to start by mixing a puddle of cad yellow. Just clean the top of this orange. Normally I don't care about that little bit of dirty colour, but for a sky, bright sky like this, I want a nice clean orange. So this is cadmium orange. It's Winsor and Newton cadmium orange, which is a yellowish orange. And you can sort of see it. There's my cad yellow, this is my cad orange. And then here we've got a colour that's orange. It's got a little bit more red in it, so I'm going to add some Scarlet Lake to that. And that's good. And I'm going to make a little puddle here of that same colour. Just some cad orange and a little bit of the Scarlet Lake. But now I'm going to add a small amount of French Ultramarine. and this is the duller area of the sky that's furthest away from the sun. Just re-wet the back of this again. And I'll wet the board. If we look at these clouds, you can see how they're in bands, they're relatively horizontal bands. And the other thing is the colours are brighter down here and duller up above. If you just start painting the sky as it is, you're going to end up with the dull paint flowing into your bright paint. And it's hard to keep those streaks in position if you're painting with you're painting in this position here. So what we're going to do is, when we paint this sky, is we're going to move the board around like this, and we're going to paint it this way. This will mean the colours will tend to flow this way, because my board is at about 20 degrees, and you'll have less bleeding in this direction. So that should keep the brighter colours separated from the duller colours, plus it'll give us our horizontal cloud shapes. To make it easier for yourself, you might want to turn the reference around. So we'll rotate the painting like that, and this is just while we do the sky, okay? But it's easier to keep in your mind where you're painting, so you're not having to flip from horizontal to portrait style. So I'm going to start with a cad yellow. Now remember, I've moved the sun to about there, and there's a lot of white there. Obviously in reality it wouldn't be white, but for this situation I'm going to leave a lot of white paper there. And just to help you, I've left my finger there to remind you not to paint all the way through there. So I'm using the side of the brush to create that broken edge of bright sky in the cloud. And right now my concentration is more on creating an interesting pattern here. And then I'll extend that in that direction, extend it in this direction. And I'm going to run that all the way down to the water's edge. That's good enough. Now I can go into some orange. and then start putting in some of this orange Scarlet Lake mixture to indicate some of these clouds. And some smaller shapes up here. Now you do not have to stick to whatever's in the reference. I never do. All I'm interested in is trying to create an interesting sky pattern. And then we'll go into this duller mixture. Maybe a bit of Cobalt Blue as well. In fact, I'll throw in some Cobalt Blue. Bit too much blue. These are all very light marks, but I wanted to find these clouds a little bit better, so for that I need to thicken the paint. I'll clean an area of my palette. I'm going to mix some thicker paint, just some Cad Orange and Scarlet Lake. These colours will also dry a little bit duller, so you have to allow for that. Then we'll add a little bit of Cobalt Blue to this mixture. A bit more blue, a bit more red. If your colours start appearing to have a little bit of green to them, all you need to do is add some red to your mix, okay? Because it's the red that will remove the green colour. Now here, I want to break these edges up. Clean my brush in water, and I'm dragging the brush through the edge of my water container so that I've removed probably about half the water, maybe a bit more even. Now I'm going to drag some of this sky colour to remove any straight edges. It should all be a broken edge. I don't want too big a white patch there. Let's remove some of this water along the edge. Try not to actually touch the paper, you're just removing the bubbles of paint and water. going to add a bit of a shadow colour, just this dull red here. Make it a bit thicker. This one will do. And I want this to come all the way to the edge. I'm going to fix this too straight. I'm going to go and dry this now. If I was to continue painting with my painting like this and me working on the water, pretty soon these colours will just bleed into one another, which is what I wanted to avoid. So I'm going to go and dry it and then we'll continue with the painting. Alright, I've dried that. I've only dried the top surface layer. The paper underneath is still quite wet. My painting is still sticking to the board. It's cool to the touch, and that's what tells you there's still plenty of moisture in it. But the top layer is dry, so I should be able to paint my trees without too much difficulty. What you can see, if you look at the reference, the trees that are directly in front of the sun, they're not a flat shape because the light shining through the leaves and the gaps softens it and brightens this area. So we're going to include that. Also, because these trees are further away than these, they're going to have two different tones. These will be dark, stronger tones or darker colours. These are going to be lighter. The colour of objects is going to be coming in part from the natural colour of the object, but also the light shining on them is also significant. So when mixing the foliage, I'll make sure that I include these sky colours within that mixture as well. We've got these colours here already. We'll just modify them for the foliage. So for the distant foliage, we're going to have more orange and a little bit more red. And then for the darker distant area, some cad orange, scarlet lake, and some cobalt blue. We'll also add some French ultramarine. Cobalt blue is not critical to this. It's the French ultramarine that's going to give us the darker colour. Test on a piece of paper. That will do. So these are going to be the colours we're going to start with, and then I'll modify them as I move into other parts of the painting. I think this is maybe just a bit weak. Tiny bit of cobalt blue. Now, I don't have a lot of paint in my brush, and you can tell because it's not bouncing back to a point. So I've picked up the paint, dragged the tip of my brush on the edge of my palette, and that'll take out about half the water. And I'm going to use this to create some texture which will hopefully read like foliage, which it should because I've been doing it for 25 years. And I'm just loosely following the pencil marks. Then we'll go into this darker mix. quick brush strokes because I want to create a bit of a broken edge along the water's edge there. More blue. I'm going to drop in some of this yellow in here. Alright, so what I just did then is something that's you do every now and then. I moved the sun, but then kept painting what I was looking in the reference. So I've been brightening this area, whereas this is the area that should be brightened. So luckily I've spotted it before I got too far down the track. I don't mind a little bit of extra light at the top here, but this area should not be so bright. But this area definitely should be bright. Get rid of a few of these dots. Now we'll work on this side, and this area here is going to be stronger in tone. So for that, we've got this darker mixture. Going to add a little bit more French ultramarine, a little bit more orange. Leave a few bird holes. Barely touching the paper, using this part of my brush and the texture of the paper to create these lovely edges. Throw in a few branches or tree trunks. Same here. Going to drop in some of this brighter mixture. So when we talk about dropping in paint, we're just using the tip of our brush, which has quite a bit of paint in it, and just touching the wet paper. Yeah, normally that would bleed down, but this is already drying a little bit. See, it's still quite damp, so it will continue to flow down a bit more, but just to be on the safe side, I'm going to pick up some more paint. So we've done the sky, we've done the distant trees, the closer trees. Now we're in position to do the water and the reflections. Reflections are going to be duller than the colours that are being reflected, because the colour of the water merges with the colour of the reflection. So that's something to keep in mind. So the colours of the sky are going to be dulled off a little bit, right? And that's easy to do. I can pick up a little bit of this greeny colour and that will dull these colours quite easily. Where I've got the bright white, I'm going to just paint a little bit of that weak orangey mixture. So where I've got white paper there, I don't want white paper here. That'll do. But now I've got to go and dry that because I want some crisper edges in this area. Okay, so we've got this orange. We'll add a little bit more red to that. Bit of yellow to that. And at this stage, I wouldn't be looking at the reference unless I'm just after a guideline for tones or something like that, because what I'm going to be reflecting is what's in my painting, not what's in the reference. So this is where the sun is now, so we're just going to grab some of this brighter colour. It doesn't have to be exact, but your reflection's directly below the object you're reflecting. The ripples in the water can modify that somewhat, but you still want the bulk of the reflection of the sun in this position. So I'm just starting with this dirty yellow colour. Now I'm going to go in with this more orange colour. Need more of that, and I want it a bit stronger in tone. And we'll dull it with a little bit of this green. Now we'll drop in the reflections of these trees. I'm going to take out most of the paint from my brush. Just break up these edges just a little bit, but I don't want to lose all that light area. Along the water's edge, quite often you get areas that are lighter or darker. So I'm going to pick up some of this dark paint, darken it with some more French Ultramarine. And there's reeds along that edge, so I'm going to take out most of the paint from my brush, splay the brush out a little bit, like that. Few here. We don't want the trees and the water to appear to be meeting at a sharp edge. Paper is drying now. And I'll throw the odd little swirl up just to hint at trees, or not so much trees, but bushes and foliage near the water's edge. Do the same here. Just a few quick marks like that. And that just helps add depth in that part of the painting. You sometimes get a light area where the water hits the shore, so I'm going to just hint at that with a little bit of a scratch. Maybe over here. Again, I don't want to overdo it, however. So, bright sky, duller reflections, but still representative of what's happening in our sky, and the two different tones of foliage in the distance, closer up, modified by the light. Going to dry this, and then there's one or two little additions I'm going to make before we finish this off. All right. I'm going to get a smaller brush. I'm going to put some birds in the sky. Vary their size and shape. And just for interest's sake, over the water, let's put a bird that's flying. Like that. And give it a hint of a reflection. drag my finger through that. And here there's some reeds, just to add just a little bit of extra interest in the distance. So I'll put that in. That'll do. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please give it a like, and if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please do so, and hit the notification bell so you'll be advised of each new video I produce. And if you're able, please consider supporting me on Patreon. If you have any requests for future videos like this, leave them in the comments below. And if you do like this format of video, let me know in the comments as well. I look forward to seeing you for the next one.